We've been talking about moving the needle on our spiritual zeal this weekend. We have measured our spiritual temperature, and we looked at a scale from 1 to 10. 1 to 3 is blue for cold. 4 to 7 is, thank you, is in the middle, lukewarm, and then 8 to 10, red for hot. And each one of us was asked to choose a number that we walked into the building with. Was I on the blue scale, the middle yellow scale, or into the red? And we were all challenged to move the needle toward the 10. If it's not all the way to the 10, then this gospel meeting has as its intent to help move the needle. And when you talk about your spiritual temperature, you're really talking about love for God. Because if my enthusiasm is ebbing, then that means that my love for God has slowed or is shallow. And so if I move the needle of my love for God, then my zeal will naturally follow that. And if I let my love for my God grow stale or cold, then the needle of my enthusiasm will follow that downward trajectory. So this lesson is really the key to the whole series. We're going to ask ourselves, how much am I willing to care? The key to growing a congregation is not talented members, it's not rich members, it's not even knowledgeable members, but it is members who love God with all their heart, with all their soul, with all their mind, and with all their strength, and love their neighbors as themselves. If we have love in our hearts for God, for our neighbor, then our knowledge of God will increase. Then we will give sacrificially. We will use what talents God has placed in our possession as much as possible to advance His kingdom. So the key really is love. And 1 Corinthians 13 says, if I have not love, I'm nothing. I'm a sounding brass, a tinkling cymbal. But with love, God can use me for great purposes. Now, love is not a static thing. It doesn't reach a certain level and stay there forever. Love is a dynamic thing. It moves, it ebbs, it flows, it changes. And so as I go through life, I need to maintain a careful watch on my love for God. I want to love Him with all my soul, not part. I want to love Him with all my strength, not some. I want to love Him in keep that number up, keep that level up. So it does us good to examine ourselves, 2 Corinthians 13:5, and then to make decisions to put into place habits that will keep our love for God in focus and will show Him that we are so grateful to be His children, that we're so blessed to wear the name of His Son, and that we are so hopeful to live with Him in heaven as the ages roll on into eternity. Now, if this congregation, any congregation is going to grow, not only is it dependent upon the love of the members, but it is dependent upon their love for lost souls, our love for lost souls. Because really the lifeblood of a congregation is new members. As a congregation goes through the years, the members age and they move on to their reward, and we have a funeral and we remember their lives and sacrifice and service, and then somebody else steps up and takes their part of the work, and someone younger has learned to do what they did in their youth, and they will serve faithfully. And so it's just an ongoing progression of saints marching through life. We enter stage left and we exit stage right as we go through life, and it really is a brief period that we're here and that we have to serve God. And during that time, we prepare to meet God, and we exit and we go. And somebody else is following along behind us. And that's where we are as a congregation. That's where you are as a congregation. And we have to do more than baptize our youth to replace those that we've had funerals for to help a congregation to grow. That's good. We want to do that. We want our young people to obey the gospel and to love the Lord and to serve Him all their days, but it's more than that. It has to be more than that. We have to bring in new families with new children to teach the gospel. And so how do we do that? Well, we have to be intentional about it, but it really comes down to love. If I love, then I will figure it out. If a church is a loving church, then it will figure out evangelism. It will practice evangelism. So this is a lesson that we're going to look into the mirror and ask the difficult questions. We're going to look at 4 levels of love. And as we go through our Christian lives, we want to be developing and growing, so we'll move from one level to another level on up the scale, and then we will maintain those levels and not digress as we go through difficulties and temptations and persecutions and ill health and circumstances that inevitably will come into the life of the Christian. So here are the 4 levels of evangelism. And I might say, to prepare us for these, there was a preacher who was studying the subject of lost and how the world needs Christ. And he had been studying for 2 days in his office, and he said, I need to go out and practice this and not just think about it. And so he closed his Bible, he walked out of his office, he walked down onto the street, and he came up to a man who was sitting on a bench. And he said, "Sir, are you a Christian?" And the man looked at him and said, "Mind your own business." And he said, "Sir, that is my business. That's all of our business, isn't it? To share Christ with the world." First level is the level of seeing. The level of seeing, the eye level. Jesus taught, "Lift up your eyes unto the fields, for they are white already unto harvest." John 4:35. Lift up your eyes. The first step to evangelism, the first step to a producing church, a fruitful church, is to see the world as God sees it. We all go out into the world and we see the world. We see the beauty of the creation of God, and we see the people who make up the world that God loves. But do we really see what God sees? Do we really see only 2 kinds of people? Do we see lost and saved? Because that's the only kinds of mature people in the world. Jacob read for us, "Here am I, send me." Who will go for me? God asked. Pick me. Not, "Here am I, send him." Here am I, send me. I want to do it. And if all hands go up, all of us go in a different direction every morning. Some go to school, some go to work, some go to the market, some go, well, what does your calendar have on it this week? It's not the same as on mine. It's not the same as on the person beside you. We all go into God's world every day, and we all meet different people. We engage with different souls every day. So we all have the opportunity, "Here am I, send me," and we can all go into God's, and God wants us to. Now, as we think about that, when I go, what do I see? Do I see opportunities? It's easy in our generation to say, "Look what the world's coming to." There's a lot of negative. There's a lot of sin. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of division. There's polarization. There's animosity. And we could wring our hands and say, look what the world's coming to. Or we can go out and say, look what's coming to the world. The gospel is coming to the world because I'm taking it to the world. And when you read the book of Acts, you're reading a culture that was even worse than our culture. I mean, that was the Roman Empire. They were pagan to the core. They were immoral. If you've ever read and studied about the Roman Empire, they were much farther down the road of sin than we are as a nation. And yet the gospel went into that world and people were hungry for it. The church grew rapidly. And the Christians enthusiastically went into the lion's den with the gospel. This is not what you're used to hearing. This is not what you're used to believing and practicing, but this is what you need to know. And there's hope because Jesus' grave is empty. Jesus came forth and He's alive. And He's still saving people every day. You know, I don't know this, and I don't guess anybody's in a position to really be able to be definitive about this, but it seems to me like the church is going through a period of revival in our generation. Now, I know congregations are declining in some places, but they are beginning to awaken to what we're talking about today. I was texting with Rob this week, and he said that we can account for not just House School Evangelism, but other works, sound works, account for over 2,000 baptisms last year in the United States. 2,178, I think. Now you do the math on that, 2,178 divided by 365. Jesus is saving a lot of people every day, and that's just in this country, and that's just the ones that we know about, which is probably a drop in the bucket. You think about Jesus is saving people every day. You see, Jesus is alive. Jesus sits at the right hand of God. He's not idle. Every person who's saved is saved by Jesus. Every person who's baptized comes up wearing the name of Christ. All the congregations that wear His name, that practice His doctrine, He's with them every day. He's with every member as we go out. He's wanting us to succeed. So what do we see? Do we see what He sees? The second level is the level of tears. Jesus came to earth, the most loving man who ever lived, the most selfless person to ever exist, who only did good and no harm His whole life, who offered Himself to His community, His city, His people. And they killed Him. In Luke 19, and I'm privileged to teach the gospel according to Luke. It's a marvelous book, the longest book in the New Testament, the most in-depth study of the life of Christ of the four. But in Luke 19, he records a sad day in Jesus' life. Jesus sat over against the city, which, as King James, it means he sat across from it, he looked back at it. And I guess he saw the people milling on the streets going, about their business. Those streets that he had walked. Maybe he thought about the sermons he had preached over there. Maybe he was thinking about where he would be arrested and where his trial would be and what street they would march him out of the city on over to Golgotha. But as he thought about all those people, it reminded him of a barnyard scene. My granddaddy, That sounds a little country, but we're country, in Alabama. My granddaddy had chickens. He had chicken houses, but he also had chickens running loose on the farm. I remember going there as a kid, watching them scratching and pecking, and the little chicks with the hens. Anybody? And don't raise your hand. Maybe some of you've seen and experienced this. And those little chicks would get scattered out, But you let the shadow of a hawk go over. I couldn't tell the difference in the sound of the clucking of the hen, but those chicks knew the difference. She could make that sound, some sound. And it was almost like every chick was on a string that she pulled straight to her. And they ran back and they got under her wings. And a chicken, what does a chicken weigh? 3 pounds, 7 pounds, I don't know. Not much, right? You let a 50-pound dog threaten her chicks, and she'll bow up and attack a 50-pound dog, She's going to protect those. She loves those chicks. That's instinct for a hen. But Jesus thought of himself like that hen. He said, how often would I have gathered you under my wings? So I wanted to protect you like that. I wanted to save you like that. I wanted you to see me as who I am, the Messiah. But you would not. You didn't want it. This is the reason we went through that. Not Luke 19:41. That's where the verse is. Jesus started crying. And I don't mean his eyes just got wet. There's a strong word for sobbing. You ever seen a grown man cry? You ever seen a preacher cry? Jesus cried. He wept on 3 occasions, but this time he wept at the grave of Lazarus, John 11:35. He wept in the garden, Hebrews 5:7. But this is his tears for the lost. Now, I want to go back and build back up to this. First level was what? Eyes, seeing. I think about Luke 16, 26, 27, when the rich man that died lifted up his eyes being in torment. And he said, I need some water. Would you send Lazarus over here? And he can't come. Well, can you send Lazarus back? I got 5 brothers. They're alive. They haven't died. But they're going to join me down here. And I don't want my brothers down here in this place. This is awful. It's torment. And Abraham said, well, he can't go back there either. But they have Moses and the prophets. They have the Bible. And you can almost see the rich man shaking his head. He said, no, I had that. Send Lazarus back. And Abraham said, if they won't hear Moses and the prophets, they wouldn't hear Lazarus either. The power of the word upon the human soul is greater than miracle. It's the power of God into salvation, Romans 1:16. And if one would reject that. So you and I are going out with the power of God. We're not going out with the power of God demonstrated in miracles. That age is past. 1 Corinthians 13, 8 through 10. But we're going out with the power of God because the Word of God is His power. And if a person can be converted, they will be converted with the Word of God. So we have to lift up our eyes to see what that rich man saw. He saw his brothers. He had seen his brothers many times, but he saw them for the first time differently than he had seen them before. He saw them as lost people. And now he wanted them to be saved. You see, that's eyes. But what about tears? You see, that's a level beyond. Paul loved to the level of tears Philippians 2:27, 2:18. I tell you now, even weeping, that they are the enemies of the cross of Christ. Acts 20, he preached in Ephesus with tears. I think about Jeremiah, the weeping prophet of the Old Testament. Jeremiah 9:1 records his words when he said, I wish my eyes were rivers so they could flow with tears for the daughter of my people. A preacher asked, what's wrong with the church? And somebody said, I don't know and I don't care. He said, that's it. Ignorance and apathy. I don't know and I don't care. We can't be a dry-eyed church in a hell-bound world. May my eyes fill with tears when I think about a judgment day and people go in there without any hope. Now, we won't be able to make any difference in that line at the judgment day. You could preach the best sermon ever preached and it wouldn't have any effect because the day of invitation is over in the judgment day line. And I think about that line a good bit. I started preaching about that line. I think I may just do a whole sermon on it sometime. But can you imagine standing in that line with billions of people and everybody's nervous about, oh boy, I'm getting closer. I don't know what he's going to say to me. I don't think it's going to be good. And then there's a Christian. I'm about to go to heaven. I've been looking forward to this all my life. I can't wait to meet my Lord. There's Jesus up there. Oh, I can't wait to see Him. I don't know who will be in line beside us. I don't even know if there will be a line, but I assume that we got to get there somehow, right? There's a negative and a positive way to look at that. Let me do both. You know, sometimes we sing that song, and it bothers me to sing this song. I'll be honest. We haven't sung it this weekend. When in the better land, before the bar we stand, how deeply grieved our souls may be. If any lost one there should cry in deep despair, you never mention him to me. I think about that line, and people around me, and we're all, one step closer and we're making our way, and I'm looking around and thinking, well, that's the person that you waited on me at McDonald's in the morning. That's the person that lived next door to my house, and I knew that guy. I don't like to think about that. But sometimes it helps to think about things I don't like to think about. Because I can turn my sadness into joy and I can avoid my regrets. See? But the positive way to look at that is this. Sometimes we sing that song about my bark arriving on the shores of eternity. I don't know what song that is, but it's a good thought. In other words, we cross over the river of death and we land on the other side. Our boat lands over there. Now, who will greet you there? Us there. I think about the family reunions over there. Grandparents. How many generations in your family have been in the church? Some of us are first generation, so we have to look in the other direction where we'll bring our children, grandchildren, we hope, all the way. Anyway, there'll be a family. The family will greet us there. Won't that be wonderful? What about, let's just think about our preacher. Now, we'll use a preacher. It's really anybody, but I'll use a preacher. What about a preacher that preached for 50 years and he worked hard, he was effective, and how many people did he baptize? I challenge our students set this as your goal to baptize one person a month for all of your ministry. So here's a young man that goes out and he begins preaching, and he is able to make, that's a sustainable number. And he does that. A lot of our students are 20 or 20, low 20s, So they'll probably preach for 50 years if the Lord delays His coming. So 12 a year times 50, what would that be? I'm not good at math, but 10 would be 120 times 5. So you look, can you imagine? And some of them will do better than that. But can you imagine that old preacher and his boat finally crosses over and everybody comes out to meet him and there's 1,000 people there. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for teaching me the gospel. Look at us. We're all here because of Jesus, but you told us about Him. Now, that's not just for preachers. We've been talking about bringing back amateur hour. And that's all of us. That's any of us. Who's going to meet me over there? Oh, the joy. So there's a level of tears. The third level is a level of sweat. This is when I get out of my comfort zone, I get out of my easy chair, get out of my routine, and I'm intentional about changing someone's eternity. I think about the 4 friends of the paralyzed man recorded in Mark 2. You remember Jesus was preaching, I think this was in Capernaum, which is His ministry headquarters, and He's in a house, and He's so popular at this time that the house is full of people. It's so full that nobody else can get in. And so these 4 guys, I could see them, maybe they're over visiting with their crippled friend, and they say, Jesus is in town. I heard He's over on the other side. He's over in so-and-so's house. Jesus has been healing people. You think He might could heal you? Well, I sure would like to. I'd like to talk to Him about it. So the friends look at each other and they say, let's do it. And so they get him on a bed, basically a rug. So everybody get a corner. They pick him up and they carry their friend down the street. And they get to the house and they're a little disappointed. It's like, oh man, look at that crowd. How are we ever going to... I'm sure He's in there, but I don't even see Him. Well, I guess we'll have to come back later. Sorry. No. Excuse me, could we... They wouldn't let him in, I guess. One of them says, I wonder if we were on the roof, if there's a way in from up there. Let's do it. So I don't know if they had a ladder. I don't know if there were steps. I don't know how they did it. But they got their friend on the roof. And then there wasn't a door up there. Surprise, surprise. So I bet he's right. He's probably right there. Don't you guess He's right there? Yeah, that's probably, He's in the front of the group. That's probably where He is. I wonder if we could move this tile. I wonder what. So they get down to their knees and they rip the roof off. And I guess down below, dust is coming, and what in the world? And you know how preachers are. Jesus probably just preached a little louder. We try to out-preach our distractions, but finally the light comes through. Well, see what's happening here. And then they see the bottom side of the rug. And I guess all 4 of their friends are leaned over and they're letting him down with one arm on the corner of the rug, And I suppose somebody down in the crowd caught him and helped him to the floor because they couldn't reach that far. And they did it. They got him in front of Jesus. And of course, Jesus healed him, and he took up his bed and he walked home. Changed his life forever. Marvelous story. But that miracle teaches a spiritual lesson. How many people did it take to bring him to Christ? 4. How many people does it take to bring a sinner to Christ? Usually more than one. We're all in this together. As a church, we hunt as a pack. Do you understand that picture? You know, we're not big game hunting singly. We are a congregational evangelistic organism. We plant seeds, somebody else waters them. We teach the first lesson, somebody else teaches another lesson. We begin a process that may end up converting someone 10 years from now, 25 years from now, in their last year of life. You know, we don't give up until there's no hope, and they've gone on to eternity. So, sweat. John 4:28. I have no idea what time this is supposed to be over, but I'm pretty sure it's probably pretty soon. Let me talk about this, and I'll give you the last one, and we'll finish. There was a Samaritan woman that came to a well, and Jesus was sitting on the well during the hot part of the day. And Jesus asked for a drink of water, and she was surprised because Jews didn't usually talk to Samaritans. They had a conversation. He identified himself as the Savior of the world. She believed him. And then John 4:28 says that she set down her water pot and went into the city and said, I've met a man that told me all things that ever I did. She evangelized her city. The people well, not all of them, but a crowd of people from her city followed her back out to the well, and Jesus preached, and many people believed because of the saying of the woman. And others didn't believe that day, but they believed subsequently because they listened to what Jesus said and they saw the evidence. And so it began a process that ended with many people in that city of Samaritans being saved. And those are half-breed Jews, but they're antagonistic to Jews. It's surprising that they would follow a Jewish Savior, but because Jesus is who Jesus is, and because she introduced him to them, they were saved. But it all started when she sat down her water pot. I got to sit down my water pot. What's a water pot? My routine, my jobs, my life as it is. You know, you sit down in your water pot and you go in the city, you're beginning to sweat for souls. There's effort extended. You're tired. You know, I read this somewhere and it's stuck. Most of the great things that are done in the world are accomplished by tired people. How much did you sleep last night? How early do you have to get up? How many responsibilities will you meet this week? I don't know, but I think I know. A lot. We're tired. We're busy. We've got a lot of things on the ball. Are we too busy for souls? Well, not when you ask it like that. I wouldn't dare say I am. But that means either I'm going to have to do it when I'm tired, or I'm going to have to not do something that I'm doing, or both. Is there something that I can give up that's less important than what I want to do, or is what I want to do important enough to give up sleep for or discretionary time? Am I willing to sweat for a soul? Am I willing to change my routine? Am I willing to work? 1 Corinthians 15:58 says, be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord. Inasmuch as, or for as much as you know, that Your labor is not in vain in the Lord. It's the only thing that will count in eternity. How much money I make this year, they won't ask that at Judgment Day. How big a house I lived in, what kind of car I drove, where I was able to vacation, where my kids went to college, none of that's going to matter. I mean, it matters to us now, and I'm not saying it shouldn't, but it's not really what's going to last. What's going to last is what I do for the kingdom. What's going to last are the Bible studies that I teach and the people that I influence and the souls that I restore to their first love that are made in the image of God and be with God who will be with God in eternity. That's what matters. And I want my life to matter. Don't you? I remember that when Napoleon was meeting with his generals, I read this somewhere. Early on, Napoleon took his fingernail and he scratched the top of the table. And he said, I want to leave a mark in the world like that. And he did. I don't want to live my life in that same finger in a bucket of water that spins it around and takes it out. And soon there's no evidence that it was ever there. Most people live their lives like the water. I don't want to live like that. When I leave this world, I want there to be a mark. Not name and lights, not name on a building somewhere on a university campus. No. Excuse me. I want to leave a mark in the world of saved people in my wake, of stronger churches in my wake, that when the last day comes and they roll me into a room and have a funeral, I want them to be able to truthfully say, his life made a difference in this world. I want there to be some souls on the other side of that shore that'll be glad to see me when I get over there. Am I the only one? I'm not. Because you're like that. But sometimes we need somebody to say it. Sometimes we need somebody to remind us that this world is not about the things we see. It's about the things we know. The fourth level is a level of blood. I'm not going to develop this, but am I willing to bleed for my faith? I hope I never have to bleed for my faith, but I hope that I would. If I love souls enough to bleed for them, there's not a power in hell that'll stop me from saving them. There's not a distraction. There's not a domination. There's nothing the devil can do that'll keep my mouth shut if I'm willing to bleed for my faith. The Lord's invitation is always open, and that's why we do what we do. The door to heaven's not closed yet. But a welcoming word from the Lord only comes to people who have made decisions. Most of those decisions are made in a service like this, where somebody gets out of the comfortable pew and takes the uncomfortable steps to the front and says, "Count me in. I want to be a Christian. Will you baptize me on my confession of faith? And I will sprint for heaven from this day forward." Jesus died so he could say, "He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. He that believeth not shall be damned." Mark 16:16. The rest of my life might begin in the next 3 minutes, when as a Christian I say, "I'm done living the way I've been living. My eyes are open. My heart is hot. Lord, I'm coming home, and I'll never stray again." The Lord doesn't stand in the door with his arms crossed or his hand out. He stands with his arms out, ready to hug a returning prodigal. And there's never been a hug like that. How do I come home? I take the steps. I turn from sin, whatever is in my life, I repent of it. I confess that I agree with God. I want to do better and I've done wrong. And then I bow my head and I pray like I've never prayed before, with a faithful brother. And the God who rules the world tilts his head, notes that prayer, opens my book and erases from it every sin that's there. That's what may happen in the next 2 minutes, 5 minutes. If that sounds good to you, what in the world would keep you where you are? Who cares what people think? Except the Lord. Let's stand while we sing. You may come.